Coming up to 9 minutes past 3, you're listening to Humberside Today with myself, Larry Ottaway, from the Grimsby studio, and our live guest in part 1 of Humberside today, across in Hull, is Fiona Richmond, sexy star of stage, screen and men's magazines and books, currently starring in What No Pyjamas at the New Theatre in Hull. Good afternoon to you, Fiona.
Hello.
If I could start off by asking you, what are people roughly going to get who turn out to see your show in Hull? Presumably not family entertainment.
No, not exactly, although it's not that rude, I must say. A lot of laughs. It's very heavy on laughs, less on erotica, I'd say. It's certainly not a show for heavy breathers, or trainee gynecologists, come to that. It's fun. We have, I'm myself in it. Paul Raymond is presenting it. It's called What No Pyjamas. I don't think there's any chance of anyone straying in not knowing what they're going to see. We also have a comic called Roger Kidd who's very funny. It's sort of slightly superior schoolboy humour, I would say. Lots of naked ladies, but I don't actually consider naked ladies walking around on stage particularly rude. That's what they will get.
It sounds good fun. What other projects are you working on at the moment? We'll come back to talk more about stage work, but what other projects are you working on?
At the moment, I'm in a happy position of doing almost nothing except the show, which for me is very unusual. So far this year, I've reviewed about 3 books for Punch, done 7 or 8 articles for Men Only, written a book and finished writing a play, and also finished this show off in London. I was there for 9 months doing it, and come out on the road with this, and it's only July the 8th, is it? 9th today?
I think it's about the 8th, yeah.
So at the moment we're on week 13, 14 of a 17-week tour. It finishes on August the 1st in Southsea, and then I'm going to take a rest.
Okay, well, if we can go back in time a few years now, how did you first get involved in the business of taking your clothes off, if I can put it that way?
Yes, you can. Now, let me see. God, it's so long ago. It was 1970, actually, to be precise, one summer. And I think, I'd been fired from a job I had, and I went on the dole. I can't remember what the job was. Oh, yes, running a casino, that's right. I was helping run a casino and looking after some girls. My boss called me in and told me to fire. I was actually assistant pet mother at the Penthouse Club, which meant looking after the pets. My boss called me in and told me to fire all my girls, and then fired me as well, and laughed. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever been without work. So I tried the dole for 2 weeks and didn't like that. And then I saw an ad in the Evening Standard, as it was then, swimmer wanted at the Whitehall Theatre. So I was living with an American doctor at the time, and I went along and I swam in a pool. And Mr. Raymond auditioned me, and that's how I got onto the stage, through my water wings.
Did it take a lot of guts initially?
No, because maybe I had a strange upbringing. I was never actually ashamed of being in the nude, I wasn't at home or my parents weren't. No, that didn't. When it actually came down to appearing on stage with an audience, what worried me more than anything was I had a very small part just coming in the show called Pyjama Tops and swimming across the pool and swimming back again. That didn't worry me. What worried me was being late and spoiling the actors' or actresses' lines, because obviously timing is very essential, and I hadn't done a lot of stage work. And I had pasted up on the side of the set the sort of 4 pages leading up to my cue, so I wouldn't be late. And at the end of the week, I suddenly realised I hadn't got any clothes on, but by then it was too late. I got totally used to it.
Now, you mentioned nudity in connection with your upbringing there. It's something I was going to ask you. What was the reaction of your parents? Presumably they didn't mind too much.
Well, no, they didn't. I phoned my mother and told her I'd had something to tell her. And she said, "Oh my God, you're not pregnant, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I've got a job." And my mother was an actress before she became a teacher. And I said, "It's on the London stage." And she was absolutely thrilled about that. I said, "Well, there is one slight snag, or you might call it a snag. I'm not wearing any clothes." And I could hear her talking to my father. And Daddy saying, "Oh, is she happy?" And then Mummy came back and said, "Are you happy?" And I said, "Yes." And they said that was fine. And we carried on from there.
That's a nice attitude, yeah.
Well, they were fairly unusual parents, I must say. I mean, my father unfortunately died in 1977. My mother's still alive, but I mean, they were quite extraordinary. Maybe that's why I'm a bit peculiar. I don't know. I don't think I am, but a lot of people seem to think I am.
Speaking very generally, do you have a lot of difficulty coping with men when they know who you are?
No. In a word, obviously people have a preconceived idea of what I'm going to be like. That is, people that haven't met me and only know me through the media. And it's always I'm going to be sort of much taller with absolutely enormous boobs and hair sort of piled high on my head and enormous eyelashes and makeup running down my face. And I'm not really at all, well, I'm not anything like that. And I think once people meet me and talk to me, the nicest thing they can say is, God, you're perfectly ordinary and normal. And I think that's quite nice. And then we start off on a new level, so no, I'm not treated. I think I am to start with. I mean, I have a boyfriend who works for a television company, and when I first went down there, I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary. You know, I just went to see him, and I was in the canteen having a cup of tea. It was all nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Oh my goodness, whatever, whatever. And now, I mean, we've been going out for this is the beginning of our 6th year together. I'm treated like anyone else's bird, which is, nobody takes me notice except to say hello and how are you or whatever, which is lovely. And that is the way I like it to be.
And you don't find you're sort of bombarded with proposals of marriage?
Oh, yes. I mean, I get an awful lot of fan mail, yes, but I don't mind that. I mean, I try to answer most of it. I have a sort of group of 6 gentlemen of various ages who write continuously to me all the time. And obviously I can't write back all the time, but I do write whenever I can. And I also have people who come to the stage door, who come again and again when I'm on tour and come almost to each town. I suppose you could call them Fiona Richmond groupies. I don't know what. They're all mostly elderly gentlemen. I don't know what that says. But I'm quite happy. No, they're lovely. They bring me gifts of flowers, chocolates and whatever. They're very sweet.
Would you say that stage shows were your particular speciality, getting back to the show that you currently have on in Hull? I
don't, yes. I mean, there's certainly the shows I do are peculiar to me, peculiar to nobody else. There, in fact, is no one else that does this type of show. In a way, I'm incredibly lucky, because I always thought they'd be looking over my shoulder when I was 29, that there would be somebody springing up behind me, and there hasn't been. Now I'm 35. I was 35 this March. I actually quite like someone else to be coming along behind me, because then I could write and direct and costume and do other things, which I'd like to do, but there actually isn't anyone else. I wouldn't advise anyone else to do what I've done. It suited me. I wouldn't advise any young person setting out to do it. You need a skin about sort of 20 feet thick to take the insults and abuse you get from people, especially our lovely press.
Have other people tried and failed, or has nobody dared to try?
Well, I don't even think it's daring, actually. I've got my own reasons why I think it is. I mean, I just think it is. When I started, as I said, in 1970, I was paid £30 a week. It's very hard work, discipline-wise. You have, as a young girl, have to give up every part of the evening, the most social part of the evening, should I say, the hours between, 6 and 10. You have to work 6 nights a week. You only ever get a Sunday off. When you're on tour, this Sunday was my day off, and I travelled from Inverness to Hull. That's classed as a day off. It is very hard work. I've done about 6 of these shows. And the girls I work with are all young and lovely, and they do it for one show, and then they disappear, because if they're young and they're lovely and they've got good bodies, they can earn almost as much as they earn in a week doing modelling. You have to be incredibly keen to get on the stage. You want to have to do it very, very, very badly, which is what I did, and to have great sort of tenacity, I think. Otherwise, it is very hard work. It's hard graft. The girls in the show I'm in at the moment, there's 5 lovely girls, they don't really get a day off for 17 weeks. For very little reward, you could say, financial reward, unless they're absolutely desperate to get on stage.
And heavy workload.
Yes, it is. I mean, it is.
You say that the show is heavy on laughs, but how seriously do you take your role as an actress?
Oh, my goodness me. Well, I would say not at all. I mean, there's a line in the show where the comic Roger Kitter says he does a little bit of business, and he says, oh, and the audience always laugh, and he says, oh, don't laugh, do you mind, I'm acting? And I will say to him some nights, well, you're the only one that is. I think, you see, the trouble with critics, and we had a lady, Prue, somebody who came in here, they actually review it as though it's a serious piece of theatre. It's an entertainment, I would say. I consider myself a performer rather than an actress. I go out there and I hope, I mean, the girls look lovely, and we wear sort of glamorous clothes when we wear clothes, and our makeup and hair is all done, and hopefully we look glamorous and attractive. But as far as acting goes, I mean, this thing, Watch No Pyjamas, I call it a thing, started life as a French farce. We've mutilated it. When I say we, myself, Roger Kitter and Kevin Sheehan, who play the main parts, have absolutely mutilated it. and made it as funny as possible. We've stuck in some appalling old jokes. The older they are, the more people laugh. I mean, it is played totally for laughs. There is never any intention when I come on stage and play the part of a lady who thinks she's bought a riding school and she's bought a brothel. I mean, I actually don't think as I'm saying my lines, I am this character. Because when I say certain things, people laugh. They only laugh because Fiona Richmond is saying them, not the character. It's very light on acting, intentionally.
So you have no ambitions to move into an area of acting straight roles?
Well, no, I have lots of ambitions, millions, too many to go into here. I'd be here forever. But no, as far as acting or performing is concerned, I would obviously like to do dressed comedy eventually. There is such a dearth of lady comedians until the lovely Pamela Stevenson, who looked halfway decent in England or in Britain. In America you have hundreds of them. You have marvellous sitcoms. But in England you don't. They're always written for men or for men and women. Very rarely are they ever written for women. And I think there are a lot of talented, funny ladies around. And if anyone's listening, we should be given a better chance.
Right. How much part do you play in the writing and the producing of the show?
Well, I auditioned the cast with Mr. Raymond. The writing, I have changed the shows. I've said we put in gags and we've reworked bits, and there are whole sections that I've reworked. I costumed the show, so I'm fairly heavily involved with it. Yes, I am. I've just written a show which I hope to do sometime next year, maybe in Australia, but I don't know yet. And it's called, wait for it, Space in My Pyjamas. And if you think I've got a fixation with pyjamas, you're quite right.
Now, you say you audition with Paul Raymond.
Yes.
Is there something that you might be looking for in the girls that he isn't, or are you complimentary, or are you looking for the same thing?
No, I mean, our choice in women, I would say, is fairly similar, except I don't like women the way he does. But I think when you're casting a show of this type, you have to be very aware of not all men like very slim ladies, or ladies with small boobs or small bottoms. I would think in this show the 5 girls are an absolute total cross-section of everything, almost, and it's done deliberately. Yes, and you also have to look for girls that can move and speak, which is fairly difficult.
Do you find some areas of Britain more receptive than others to the show? Because, for instance, you were in Inverness, last week,
yes.
Swindon next week. How broad-minded is Hull?
Well, so far, we're only Wednesday, aren't we? They've been incredibly quiet, appreciative but quiet, compared to Scotland. I mean, I must say that I've opened shops in Scotland. I had never until this tour performed live in Scotland. It is the most amazing experience. We played the Pavilion Glasgow, which, as you probably know, is the graveyard of more comics. I mean, I think Des O'Connor fainted on the stage there. But the audiences are notorious. We went on in fear and trembling. I mean, I'm not on for the first 6 minutes, and I sat in my dressing room listening to the noise, and it's sort of Lions 20, Christians 0. I mean, it does actually feel like you're about to be thrown to the lions. But they liked us, and they showed their appreciation in extraordinary ways. I mean, they cheered and screamed and chanted. We had so much audience participation that the show was almost half an hour longer each night than it should have been. But they were lovely. I mean, we had 150 standing each night in a theatre that held, 1,400. It was absolutely amazing. I've never known anything like it. I mean, in London I played this show for 9 months, and the audience, they're all right. They're terribly sort of lukewarm, and we've seen all this before, but obviously in Scotland they hadn't. And it was amazing. The sort of the noise and the cheering at the end was spectacular. We all had a ball. It does an old lady's ego a lot of good.
You say an old lady, jokingly. How long do you think you can go on in this role as a sex symbol?
I would think till I'm 30, which was 5 years ago. I'm more amazed than most that people ask me to go on stage and take my clothes off, and that people come in to look at me. I think I'm in reasonably good nick. I would hope I would have the good sense to give up when I think I'm not. That's all I can say. I can't promise it'll be the last time, as the lady critic Prue wanted it to be, that I'll come to Hull. I may disappoint her and come back.
Let's talk a wee bit more seriously for a second. You do a phone-in programme, or have done,
yes.
a radio station in London.
Yes.
Do you think we have more sex problems these days, or do we just talk about them more?
Oh dear, I actually don't think people talk about them enough, and there'll be hands held up in horror all around Radio Humberside listeners. you see, I think people will sit down, a couple, and they will discuss the mortgage and the kids and the house and what colour the bedroom needs painting and the mattress is too hard or whatever. But I know very few couples that will actually sit down and say, look, I'm sorry, what you're doing in bed is not right, and could you do this, or and I'd like this to be done. They just don't. And when this happens over a period of 10 years, and now we're supposed to be so sexually liberated, then it's incredibly difficult for a couple that are in this position to break down this enormous invisible barrier. You can't turn around to your husband after 10 years and say, look, you've been doing it wrong for 10 years, or you've been doing it the way I didn't like for 10 years. And I still don't think there's enough communication like that between couples. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. But I think there should be an answer. I don't think the sort of women's libbers that shout and scream and demanding their sexual rights are particularly doing them any good anyway. I mean, a woman holds a man's sexuality in her hands, so to speak, because if she laughs at him, I mean, it's fairly obvious if a man cannot perform sexually, but it's not if a woman can't. So men are at a huge disadvantage. I feel terribly sorry for men. But for couples it is a huge problem, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of people, and it's all right for people like me to say, oh, we know these shows, nude shows, who wants to see, do people want to see them? But I'm sure there are lots and lots of people. Well, the more I go around the country, the more I become aware of it. People who still undress in the dark or in the bathroom and run into bed, and their husbands haven't seen them in the nude or haven't seen a nude lady except in wider magazines like Men Only Sell So Well. I mean, there is a whole area. There are very great problems, and I don't actually know what you do about them. And I think a lot of these sex manuals, some of them, do an enormous amount of harm, because there are people maybe who have totally satisfactory sex lives, but then they start reading these incredible things that they should be swinging from the chandelier and waving whips and wearing galoshes or whatever else they've got to do, and then that is spoiling what they have between them. It's a very, very difficult area. I mean, I'm sure even myself am guilty of that. I would say, oh God, I can't sing, or I can't ride a bicycle. I would never say to anyone I'm lousy in bed, nor would anyone else on this earth, I don't think. And it's a problem that, I don't know, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Have you any views generally on the so-called permissive society, bearing in mind that a lot of Radio Humberside listeners are middle-aged and elderly?
Yeah.
They might see it as almost the beginning of the end, or do you see it as a stable liberal society that we've got?
I think it's fairly stable and fairly liberal. You see, I mean, what happened in Liverpool, you see, is far more important to me than nudity on stage or rude books or whatever. I mean, we have great problems with our youth, with unemployment. There are far more serious problems for people to deal with than the people that protest about shows like mine coming to places like Hull or wherever else we go. I don't know. I mean, the country's in a mess as far as the youth, as the unemployment, the recession. I don't actually think permissiveness is, or so-called permissiveness is doing any harm. I think there should be censorship. I think the youth should be protected. I mean, Men Only was one of the first magazines to put on the front cover not to be sold to people under 18 years of age. Of course, it doesn't stop them, but it might help. But as going back to this type of show, as far as this show, it's very clearly worded, as I said earlier, what type of show it is. I don't think there's any chance of any of your middle-aged listeners straying in to see it if they don't want to see it. And I think there should be a place for this sort of entertainment. There should be a place for rude books and magazines. Because people obviously, I think the more that it's stopped, or people try to stop it, then the more greater people's obsession for it will be.
Do you personally come under a lot of attack from people like supporters of Mrs. Whitehouse and also by feminist groups, as if again I can put it this way, a figurehead of soft porn?
Yes, I mean, I don't actually consider what I do as soft porn or even bordering on it, but what's pornography, and here we go into another whole field. But I just think people like Mary Whitehouse and people like Paul Raymond could actually get together and agree on what pornography is. I'm sure he agreed. I mean, nothing that's perverted. He wouldn't have anything that to do with coercion or the involvement of minors, all this sort of thing. But I mean, Mary Whitehouse goes potty over sort of, there was a programme called Pennies from Heaven, Dennis Potter. And a lady in that rouged her nipples with lipstick. And Mary Whitehouse went ape, to put it politely. Now, in the same programme, a guy was shot point-blank range with a 12-bore or whatever it is. Now, that to me was absolutely horrendous. I find her values quite extraordinary. And I think she'd be backed by a lot of more people if she concentrated on things which were really harmful, which I think 99% of the population could actually agree on.
On a lighter footnote to the interview, you stood against Clement Freud and Philip Agee for the rectorship of Dundee University.
I know, I can think of a lot of men I'd rather stand against. My goodness me, yes, I did indeed.
Was that serious, or was that a publicity?
No, I mean, obviously it started from the point of view of the students. I'm sure it started out as a joke. I'm sure a few of them had a bit to drink one night and said, oh, we know what we'll do. We'll get this bird. And as Clement Freud pointed out, I had to get 50 votes to be able to stand, but he said a mountain goat could get 50 votes. So I pointed out I wasn't a mountain goat. But no, once I accepted it, I did actually, I was very serious about it. I travelled up to Scotland. I attended a thing called the Hecklings, which is probably the worst experience of my life. You have to stand as a candidate. They all did it, and we went in alphabetical order, so I was last. You have to stand and speak, and I'd never spoken in public before. I mean, learning lines and appearing on stage is totally different to standing up in front of what they said would be 200 students. At 8 o'clock they had to lock the doors because there were 2,000 crammed into the hall and they couldn't get any more in. And that's where the word, I presume, to heckle comes from, because they scream and they shout and they throw things, and the women's libbers got so angry, and I mean, it was an absolute free-for-all. But after all that, I got through it all, and some really rude questions about, I won't go into that here. But then I stayed in Dundee the week. Clement Freud returned to London to vote on devolution and the abortion bill, and Philip Agee went all off round the Highlands to get whip up votes to be allowed to stay in Britain. And I was the only candidate that actually stayed and visited all the faculties and talked to all sorts of groups of people. And at the final, at the vote counting, I was the only one there. And I mean, Clement Freud only just made it, which I think is fairly spectacular.
Yeah. Okay, that's smashing. It's What No Pyjamas that you're starring in. It's at the New Theatre in Hull, and that's running till Saturday.
Yes.
Okay then, Fiona Richmond, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Humberside today this afternoon.
It's been a pleasure, thank you.
Thank you. It's 29 minutes now to 4 o'clock. We're running a wee bit behind with the sort of normal schedule of the programme. It's the weather information, of course, coming up next. And we'll have that weather information right after another of the Lucky 13 selections this afternoon. David Parton and Isn't She Lovely?